Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos. I'm Rick Manning. George Landreth has left the building. If you'd like to hear a broadcast of today's show, for more information, please check out our website, ccrsnetwork.com and ccrshow.com. And please like us, friend us, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just look for the Conservative Commandos. You know, very rarely do I get a guest where I'm just anxious to get a chance to talk to them, because they've done something that is, not only have they made a difference in the world, but they've done something that's so extraordinary in terms of being able to explain it so the rest of us can see kind of what's happened, and gives you a real inner look at the inner workings of Washington, D.C., without it reading like it's some kind of tome from the 1800s. And Carrie Severino, who's joining us today, has done just that with her partner Molly Hemingway, who co-authored this book. And it's called Justice on Trial, the Kavanaugh Confirmation. Now, we all familiar with the crazy scenes in the courtroom and the insanity that went around the Kavanaugh confirmation. And Carrie and Molly take the time to take us through that. But for me, more significantly, they showed a little window in the beginning of the process the president used for choosing a nominee, and the political campaign that goes in to where the various justices aren't sitting there just benign, sitting in the background, just hoping they get chosen, but actually taking affirmative steps to get chosen. I find it just intriguing, the whole process, and I really appreciate you opening the door. Carrie, thank you, and welcome to Conservative Commander Radio.
Great. It's great to be here. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Even the intrigue was a really fun part of this bit to get out there, that primary season when we didn't know who the nominee would be, but certainly everyone was all hands on deck trying to, all the clerks saying, I want my judge to have the best talk possible. So
it's a great thing. And Carrie, for her own part, has been a Supreme Court judge clerk to a Supreme Court judge, Clarence Thomas, and additionally now is part of the Judicial Crisis Network. What's your official title there?
Yes, I'm the Chief Counsel and Policy Director. Okay. I head the group.
Okay,
and our objective is getting as many constitutionalist judges in the court who are going to interpret the laws and the Constitution as they're written.
Carrie is the, when the president nominates somebody and there's a big fight about it, Carrie's the person who is out there coordinating the battle. She's the general on the battlefield to make certain that we get the right judges into the federal judiciary, and we sort of a person who's behind the scenes a little bit, but somebody who every single one of us owes a debt of gratitude. So let me say up front, thank you very much, Carrie.
Thank you. It's an exciting time to work in judicial nominations.
It is indeed, and everybody wants to thank her. Should go out and buy the book, Justice on Trial, the Kavanaugh Confirmation. But let's get right down to it. What prompted you to write this book? It's a great insight into it. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. Tell me, what prompted it? What was the impetus?
Yeah, so Molly and I both knew that the Kavanaugh confirmation was one of the most important things to happen to the country last year. It wasn't just Brett Kavanaugh that was on trial. Really, it was kind of the notion of justice, of due process, the rule of law, presumption of innocence. Justice was on trial, and that's where we got the name of the book. And we wanted people to understand both what happened, both of us watching this, and she was a journalist and I was actively involved in it. We knew there were stories that were not yet told, and I knew there was more that I didn't even know. I didn't know how much more we would find. So we interviewed more than 100 people. We interviewed the president, the vice president, Supreme Court justices, dozens of senators, their staffers, and all the people working on this, people who knew the Blasies and the Kavanaughs. We just wanted to get the fullest story possible. As you said, I clerked for Justice Thomas, and I've seen the concerted campaign since he was confirmed to try to rewrite history. And the revisionist history is something we wanted to just nip in the bud here, because we didn't want people to try to rewrite and reimagine what happened. We thought everyone, while it's still fresh in our minds, let's go back through and remember who were the bad actors here. What was the strategy? Because it's the same strategy. It's the same that they keep pulling out for nominee after nominee. We got to be able to recognize it, and we want to hold people accountable in the hopes that this doesn't become the new normal for our confirmation process.
Well, I think that's wise, and it is it's interesting how the standards shift so often when we, the Democrat comes up and they're nominated, and about 20% of the 20 to 30 Republicans, unless there's a compelling reason to vote against them, 20 to 30 senators will vote for them just because they believe it's a nominee, and if they didn't stumble and act like a fool, they were pretty much guaranteed to do it. The Democrats showed that the rules have changed, though, from a partisan perspective. Was what shocked you about the process in terms of the actual confirmation itself?
Well, one thing that was impressive was that right out of the bat, before we even knew who the nominee, in many cases, people were announcing we're going to vote against him. Right, as you said, certainly the Democrats are in a rule where it is the not just the exception rather than the rule. It is the almost in this case unique exception. There was one whole Democrat who voted for Judge Kavanaugh, who really was one of the most qualified and well-respected judges on the entire appellate court. So the rules have changed. We talk about that sweep of history a little bit, the Bork hearings, the Thomas hearings, and how this all fits together. And what we have seen is a pattern where Democrats have been upping the ante regularly. A lot of times it's kind of taken always a generation or so behind. The Republicans are going, oh, wait, this is new. We have new rules here. And you could hear it even in the Kavanaugh process. Remember Lindsey Graham's speech. And he's one of those people who really his approach for a long time has been, hey, if they're not, this is someone who's qualified. I don't care what their judicial philosophy is. I'm going to vote for them. And you can certainly see that that's not the approach that the left takes. And you heard him saying things like, hey, I voted for Sotomayor. I voted for Kagan. Where is the comedy? Where's the back and forth here from the Democrats? Newsflash, they don't feel like they owe you anything, and they're playing hardball here. But the other good news is we've learned from some of those previous confirmations. So I think we had a Republican team that both in the administration, in the White House, DOJ, and in the Senate was much more prepared to fight back and fight back hard for their nominee than we have seen in the past. So that was really encouraging. I think without having learned some of those lessons, Kavanaugh would not have been confirmed under these circumstances.
And for many people on the conservative side, you lay this out a little bit. Of the choices, while all were good, Kavanaugh was in many respects seen as being perhaps the least desirable because he was seen as being too close to the establishment, being raised up through the Bush White House and being seen as a confidant in that area. Many who were Trump supporters didn't fully trust him going in. And yet, and the thought was, at least my thought when he was picked, was he was picked because he was the easiest person to confirm in terms of the group because of all the things you talked about, track record and the like. The least offensive, the one who everybody likes, the one who they've all voted for before. So, and so in some respects, was it surprising to you that they decided to go all in replacing Justice Kennedy with someone who many people felt would be maybe slightly more conservative than Justice Kennedy, but certainly maybe not, but not in the par of a Scalia or a Thomas?
Yeah, well, I mean, so a couple of things to that. One is certainly the White House thought this was going to be an easier confirmation than it was on some levels. They knew because you're replacing Kennedy, doesn't matter who you nominate, it's going to be kind of crazy. But they also did think on some level, here's someone who's been through background checks before. He's lived so much of his life in the public eye. He's a Boy Scout. Like this should be pretty easy, right? And so they thought that they could get him through. And I think he did have, some of the people like Amy Coney Barrett, I think, would have been very hard with the very slim margin. I mean, we're talking you could lose no votes kind of margin we had in the Senate going into this, in particular, where John McCain was still ill, not really able to make it back 4 votes. So there was that aspect of, in one sense, he was a safe pick, but I think there's another sense in which he was the pick that actually did have the longest track record. We learned something, as I said, from all these histories. One of the things we learned, and Justice Souter is an example, and frankly, Chief Justice Roberts is a little example of that as well, is when you don't have someone who has a long track record of solid conservative judicial opinions, of standing up and making difficult decisions as a judge, then you can't 100% predict what they will do. So there were people, I mentioned Barrett again just because she was someone a lot of people talked about as a front runner, but also Judge Kethledge was another one. But she had, for example, a very short record on the bench at the time. She has a longer one, obviously, now. I think a lot of people forget that Kavanaugh really brought to this over a decade on the bench, and including some really bold decisions. He had one of the strongest Second Amendment decisions, out there. He had been leading the charge for this really important pushback against overgrowth of the administrative state and this burgeoning, unaccountable, new branch of government that's coming. He had written opinions that were incredibly strong, cutting that down, cutting it down to size, and including sometimes being in dissent on these very not completely novel, but ideas about let's go back to the constitutional structure that hadn't been embraced by a lot of other courts. He says it in dissent, and later we saw the Supreme Court agreeing with him. So he had been a leader in some of these really important areas. So I don't think he was a compromise nominee in that sense. I think he actually had one of the strongest records, and that was a big factor in his choice as well. But I do think it certainly came out. Right out of the gate as being a very hostile nomination process, and really illustrated that, look, if they're going to do this against Kavanaugh, who was widely respected across the spectrum, they'll do it against anyone. I think we need to make sure we have that in mind going into the next nomination process.
We're up against the break. We're with Carrie Severino, Justice on Trial, the Kavanaugh easy for you to say, Justice on Trial, the Kavanaugh confirmation. And by the way, what she just said is amplified in the book. It really was part of the strategy for getting the nomination done, and you just did a great job of synopsizing it. But the book really hits out of the ballpark. We will be right back as we are out of time, so stay with us. And after the break, we'll have Carrie Severino talk a little bit more about the book itself, but also looking forward to why the shaping of the judiciary is so important. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos. Rick Manning, George Landreth has left the building. If you'd like to hear a rebroadcast of today's show, or for more information, please check out our websites, ccrsnetwork.com and ccrshow.com. And I've got Carrie Severino with us. She's the author of Justice on Trial, the Kennedy Confirmation, along with Molly Hemingway. Molly does extraordinary work. You need to look her work up on the web. She is one of the best reporters in Washington, D.C. And if the Pulitzers actually were involved in anything other than political choice making, Molly would be one of many conservative reporters who would be up for some of the top awards in the nation, just because she works real hard and she's a really good reporter. Carrie is the head of the Judicial Crisis Network and has been the point of the spear on confirming nominations, including the Kavanaugh nomination. So tell me, Carrie, if somebody was reading Justice on Trial, the Kavanaugh confirmation, I can't say it, the Kavanaugh confirmation, if somebody's reading that, what's the one thing, when you think back on the book, what is the one thing you're hoping that they'll take out of it, and the knowledge bit that they will get so they can move forward, knowing more and being better prepared for the future?
Yes, tough to pick one thing. I mean, we learned a lot of great details about, the human cost to the Kavanaughs and their family, their friends, about a lot of models of courage, from Senator Susan Collins to Ashley Kavanaugh herself, to Rachel Mitchell, who is the prosecutor involved in there, Leland Kaiser, the friend of Blasie's, who really is a liberal Democrat herself, didn't want Kavanaugh on the court, but when she got brought into it, claiming she was a witness to this event, had to say, no, I didn't see this, and that took a lot of courage. I think, though, one of the things that's really important to know for the next time were the kind of things we uncovered about the coordination of this campaign, down to coordination with actual senators, which was very discouraging to see. We saw a lot of violation of the norms of the Senate and of the rules of the Senate. Probably remember Senator Booker, who was disclosing confidential documents that are covered by the Presidential Records Act that were loaned from the White House to the Senate, and just kind of throwing out the window all of those agreements. There were a lot of people that we talked to who said this really raises questions as to the cooperation of the White House and Senate for future nomination processes. Of Senator Feinstein, her treatment of the Blasey Ford letter was outrageous. And, we describe how she said at the time, oh, well, I wanted to keep it confidential, and that's why I waited a month to disclose it. Conveniently enough, a month until it created the major, splash in the media and caused as much trouble as possible for the nomination, rather than addressing it in a timely manner. It turns out there is a process for addressing confidential allegations, and she knows that. And it was created after the Thomas Hill hearings to allow those investigations to be done. So you don't just ignore allegations, you should look at them, but you need to look at them in a way that protects the privacy of the victim, that protects the privacy, or the person alleging that they're a victim, protects the privacy of the nominee. In that way, it's not all being brought out in public, which I think would have been better for everyone, would have been better for the process, would have been better for the American people. She ignored that. And we learned that was something that actually lost her a lot of credibility with some of those key votes, like Susan Collins, who said, wait a minute, why are you messing with this process? And then down to the rollout of these things, one of the really shocking things, we didn't even believe it the first time we heard it until we heard it from multiple people, was that during the Kavanaugh-Blasey hearings, during one of the breaks, Senator Hirono in a back room says to Senator Harris, he's commenting on how it was such a great idea of them to have Blasey Ford herself wear a blue suit because it invokes the teal suit worn by Anita Hill, and how it was a great idea to have her ask for caffeine so they could get a Coke bottle in front of her. Because remember, there was this horrible allegation involving a Coke can with Justice Thomas, more of those unsubstantiated allegations, back from 30 years ago. So this is something that, down to the Democratic members of the Senate, they're helping with the PR campaign about this nomination. That I thought was outrageous. And it's something that really people need to just open their eyes and realize how deep this process was, embedded into even the Senate itself, not to mention, of course, the many groups on the outside who were flying in protesters, who were paying their bail, who were giving them legal training for how to get arrested. It was a complete circus, and I think people ought to be held accountable for their roles in that.
Absolutely, and it's one of the astonishing things that hasn't happened that I'm hoping DOJ will take up. If we do not get, it seems to me, if we don't get people who actually violated the law, who chose to violate the law, if they don't pay a penalty, if they don't pay a real price for having done that, there's absolutely no break on doing it in the future. The only way you create any kind of incentive for people to follow the rules is to enforce the rules. And they chose deliberately not to. And to date, no one's paid a price for that. Justice Kavanaugh has paid a price. His wife paid a price. The Senate paid a price. But the people who actually exacted the damage have been allowed to walk scot-free out the door so they can do it all again and do learnings from this so they can play even harder next time. And so it's, to me, if there's one message to the Department of Justice, it's you need to prosecute people who violated the law. I don't want political prosecutions. I want the actual law upheld. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there were people referred to by the Senate Judiciary Committee to DOJ. There were people who submitted some of these crazy allegations who admitted they were false. So it's not like a question of, wow, is there evidence? No, there are people who said, oh yeah, that didn't actually happen, but I said Kavanaugh raped me, or I said I saw Kavanaugh rape. You got to prosecute that, and that is the same criminal penalty as lying to the FBI. This is serious business, folks.
Well, and since we've engaged in now the politics for the last 3 years of guilty until proven innocent, through the Mueller investigation and the Kavanaugh hearing, we've effectively changed the whole balance here in terms of, if you are a Republican or if you're a conservative nominee, you're subjected to one set of standards, and if you're on the left, you're given all the benefits of doubt under the law. And I do not want people on the left to be subjected to what we've been subjected to. I want the benefits of the reasonable doubt, the benefits of the law, and to be accorded to conservative nominees, as it should be and as it has historically been done. Although it's always been bare knuckles, as we know from the Thomas hearing and the Bork hearing. The other side is, when called upon, they never shirk from the ability to play dirty and as dirty as they can to try to win. Carrie, I want to shift gears just very briefly. We got about 2.5, 3 minutes. The president has nominated a number of judges, federal judges, and a number more have been confirmed than any other time, in this time frame. And a lot of people are saying that the judiciary itself is being shifted based upon this one action. Tell me, what are you seeing? You're a law clerk with Justice Thomas. What are you seeing happening at the court level that affirms the importance of getting conservative judges and justices out there to kind of rebalance the judiciary.
Yeah, this is such a key issue. And I was so excited in 2016 that people became aware of how important an issue is. I actually think a lot of Americans do vote based on what they think a president's going to do with the courts, and that people weren't paying attention before. This time we realized there were a fifth of the voters who said that was their number one issue going to the polls, because you're staring at a Supreme Court vacancy in their face. But I think it's kind of a wake-up call that every president is going to appoint these judges who will be on the court for life. They may pass legislation and sign it. They may have executive orders. All of that goes through the courts eventually. And if you've got courts that are going to be rewriting those laws as however they see fit, that is not the role of the courts, and that's going to totally undermine what you're doing. So you need to have solid judges. It was shocking, frankly, to me as well, and to a lot of people. President Trump has been, I think, the best president in our lifetimes in terms of appointing judges like this, because it's not just in terms of the numbers, and he's done broken records because he prioritized appellate judges. The Democrats have actually done a good job of slowing down the process across the board for district court judges, because there's only so many they'll let people go through because they're really weaponizing procedure. But he is prioritizing it. He's getting excellent nominees. So in many cases, even if he's replacing another Republican nominee with a Trump Republican nominee, you have people who have just a world of difference in terms of their judicial philosophy. For a long time, almost all of the Supreme Court justices were Republican appointees, but some of the leading liberals in the court, Justice John Paul Stevens, who just passed away, Justice Souter, those are Republican nominees. So now we're getting it where we actually are looking at these on all levels of the judiciary really closely. I think it's been hugely important, especially as the courts are a real area of attack for this president, where you've got judges who they seem to be looking at the heading of the case and say, oh, Trump's the defendant, guilty as charged. And that's not how the law works. We have to apply the same standards across the board to Republicans and Democrats. That doesn't mean the president's going to win every time. We just want judges who are going to apply the law and not substitute politics for law. And I think that's been a huge legacy, and it's going to be a long-lasting one. These are people who will be there for life and have a generational impact.
Carrie, we're really up against the fact I should close it out now, but I've got one short answer on this. Justice Thomas has expressed concern about district federal court judges doing nationwide injunctions and how that usurps the authority of the Supreme Court. What do you think that issue can be brought up in the next couple of terms?
It certainly seems like it has to be. We're seeing this more and more as part of that strategy to overturn Trump's agenda, because you go to a friendly, liberal court, and then you get a one-size-fits-all response for the whole country. It's not how it's supposed to work, as Thomas has said. So I predict it certainly will go to the Supreme Court. I hope they take that case.
From your lips to God's ears, it's Carrie Severino. She's the author, along with Molly Hemingway, of Justice on Trial, the Kavanaugh Confirmation. Folks, buy this book. Okay, it is really, 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 it's readable, it's smart, and you will learn so much about not just process, but a little bit about the law as well. So having said that, thank you very much for being with us, Carrie, with the Judicial Crisis Network. You're listening to Conservative Commandos. And once again, we're at the end of the show, and I appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in. We know that you have other places you can be, and the fact that you choose to share your 2 hours with us, we truly do treasure it, and thank you very much. This is Rick Manning, Americans for Limited Government, signing off on behalf of George Landreth of Frontiers of Freedom. Take care and fight for freedom this week.